Hey everyone, welcome today. I'm really honored to have Danielle Zeiss with us today. She's a sought after holistic nutritionist, recipe creator, and co founder of Heal Your Adrenal Fatigue, and lover of all foods that make you feel glowy but actually taste great. Now, Danielle is the go to person when you want to know what to eat and want to know certain foods that affect your energy levels and improve the way that you feel. Today, we will cover exactly what foods help give your body energy and what foods make you feel sluggish and why, plus give you some great tips on how to create the perfect, energizing, and healthy meal. Welcome along today, Danielle.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is
Great.
going to be a
This
good
is
conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a big topic. Food, oh my gosh, it's a huge topic. We could do many interviews on this, but today we're going to focus on that. And I'd love to hear from you. How important is the food pillar in maintaining energy and optimizing health? Do you think that people give the food factor enough weight in their overall health equation? Or do you find it might be something that only gets addressed when problems start to arise?
Okay, so this is a two-tiered question and it's such a good one. And of course, like food is fuel, right? Like food is energy. So in terms of how important food is for our energy, it's vitally important. And we have a choice every time we eat to decide what kind of fuel our body gets to run on. And in regards to if how in regards to like how much it gets addressed, some
Yes.
people go crazy with the food and some people it's more challenging. So it can really depend on the situation. It can be really challenging to make those food choices. So maybe we'll like overcompensate in other areas and kind of maybe like a good example is we exercise like crazy, but our diet's not on point, but we
Uh-huh.
over exercise to make up for like the extra calories that we eat. Kind
That's
of
a good
old school
point.
mindset, but like I definitely did that back in the day, like
Yeah.
in my younger years.
Sure.
And
Yeah, you
and
do, right? You go, oh, I'll just do an extra half an hour walk because I had a piece of cake today or something. But
yeah, so we can easily overcompensate in other ways. So it just depends on which way people choose to go. And some
yeah,
people just go all in, and it can create a lot of stress when you're online in the forums researching adrenal fatigue and food for energy and seeing what worked for so and so, but what didn't work for so and all these different diets. So it can become overwhelming. And in some cases, it can create more stress for people. So it just depends on where people are at.
yeah.
Um, but I hope today we can make everything feel a lot more simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point too. Getting overwhelmed with stress is a huge part of burnout prevention. And obviously if you do have that adrenal fatigue, that next stage. So what kind of problems do you see most commonly when people are consuming foods that are not great? So if you know that, okay, my diet could be a bit better, I'm eating maybe a lot of takeaway or a lot of salty or sugary foods or processed foods, what signs show up? Like, for example, irritable bowel or gut problems, excess weight. What do you find shows up for people?
So this is really going to depend on the person too. Some of the common ones that you'll see are of course like the gut issues or irritable bowel syndrome, which they go hand in hand. So it's indigestion. It could be skin issues too if you find that you have like persistent acne or eczema, like things showing up on your skin. It can just be like even dry skin sometimes could be like lack of nourishment and essential stuff in the diet. Stubborn weight gain, of course, and then of course like the hormonal stuff that can go along with that. It's really like looking at the big picture because these choices over time will affect our bodies in different ways. And I mean, going back to like my childhood teen years too, you would see these girls and these like younger people in high school who drank all the or high school or college who ate all the greasy food and drank all the beer and had like this picture perfect skin, whereas I was like eating a pretty good clean diet and struggled with acne during those times. So it shows up in different ways for different people, and those people with really great glowing skin, maybe it was showing up in a different way for them, and it could have been stubborn weight gain, it could have been blood sugar issues. It really can affect the body in a like all sorts of different ways. It's hard to pinpoint, but like the gut issues, skin, energy, of course,
Yeah,
hormonal stuff, like these are the ways it tends to present itself.
sure. And what's the difference then between foods that give us energy, between foods that take energy. So what's the impact on the digestion, as well as, say, a few hours after you eat a vegetable based, let's say, meal versus a deep fried hot chips takeaway meal? So yeah, that's a long question, but the difference of foods that give you energy as compared to foods that take you energy, that take energy to digest.
Yeah, and you often hear of like anti-nutrients, like there's certain foods that actually use nutrients to be digested and to be metabolized, but all food takes energy. So
Right.
it's just a matter of asking or determining how much energy is it going to take. And of course, if we look at the plates of food in front of us, we have a really great instinctive awareness of what foods are going to give us energy and what foods are not. So for example, excuse me, a big plate of like veggies and quality protein and good quality fats, like these are energizing foods full of all sorts of different nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, like all the macros too, right? This is going to give you great energy, but can also tire you out if you eat like a huge amount of it, because the amount matters, right? So the amount that your body has to digest is going to take more energy too. So making sure that you're eating like a well-portioned, balanced meal full of like colorful good foods is going to take a lot less energy to digest, but also nourish your cells and give you energy. Like we're made, what we eat is going to become us on a very cellular level. So we want to think about the types of foods that are going to become like us on a physical level.
Right. So
So does
is
that
that
make sense? So
yeah. And is that the difference then of the takeaway comparison to that healthy veggie plate? So what type of, is that going to drain our energy as it's digesting? Obviously it will have more calories too, but are you referring to like it will take more energy for us to digest? Is that why we feel more tired perhaps with the heavier foods?
there's usually a couple different things. This is such a good question. A couple different things that come into play with that. Oftentimes it's the size. I mean, and it's, if we're talking like fried foods and like these higher carb meals, so it's often like a lot of sugar. If I'm thinking like, you know, a soda with French fries and maybe like chicken nuggets or like fried chicken or fried chicken and beer, like, you know, these combinations that
Right.
we see like commonly, it's going to spike your blood sugar like crazy. And there's a so the blood sugar thing is going to come into play here. And it's what goes up must come down, right? So there's going to be a crash after, but also that takes just tremendous energy for your body to process, right? It's a lot of the times it's a lot of fat. There's a lot of oils in these food, which can add a lot of extra pressure to the digestive system. And you know that feeling after a big meal. Heavy, greasy foods hit us pretty hard. But even if overeating in general, you just feel like, oh, I just need to lie down. I need to put on my stretchy pants and like lie down and just let my body deal with this. So when it's like the heavier, greasier, and you've got that whole blood sugar thing coming into play, if you're reacting to certain foods too, like a lot of the times if those foods are things that are inflaming or causing more inflammation for you, which these foods tend to do, then the hormonal response associated with that is tiring as well.
Yeah, right. So what's the inflammation then? What do inflammatory foods have to do with affecting our energy? You've just touched on that now. So it what does it do to the hormones then? Why do we feel so tired?
So, and I mean, what inflames one may not inflame another. There are some
Right.
general foods that would inflame us, but just think of it this way. And especially if you have gut issues, you might notice yourself reacting more and more to certain foods. But there's a hormonal response every time your body has to like deal with something that's inflaming you. So one example that I give a lot when, especially when we're talking about gut health, is if you have something like leaky gut or intestinal permeability, where the junctions in your intestines are just a little bit loose and stuff is slipping through the cracks that shouldn't be getting through, in the sense of like food or undigested food particles and such, it creates a hormonal response. And
Right.
when there's inflammation in the body, the number one thing your body can call on to put out the fire is cortisol.
Right.
So like we're having this whole hormonal cascade that kind of goes on when we've inflamed ourselves, whether it's with food, whether it's with these typically problematic foods, like we're talking about like the fried chicken and the beer and like the kind of like typical processed junky foods, or healthy foods that we just can't tolerate right now, maybe because we have leaky gut. So essentially every time we eat, this hormonal cascade is going on, and it's just more inflammation, more stress hormones released to kind of come out and put out that fire, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And what are some of the inflammatory foods then that we should avoid based on that?
Yeah, so like the big ones is just avoiding like the cheap refined oils as much as you
Okay.
can. And this is the really truly the biggest problem with takeout food, is just how it's cooked. Oftentimes we'll go out and we'll see like it's how, you know, you can pick healthier options, but you just want to know what it's being cooked in. And a lot of the times with processed foods, like these already prepared like cookies and muffins and cakes and such, have a lot of like just processed refined oils that aren't serving your health. So if we can get those out, that makes a really big difference. Refined sugar, alcohol, if you find that you've been drinking too much, they're just big, they just add to a lot of inflammation to the body. And it's a great start to just remove them and add more of the good stuff.
Yeah.
But I also want to add to that, it's like what I mentioned before, it's finding out what you're reacting to as well if you're having increased sensitivity. So if you notice certain foods are setting you off, then it might be a good time, especially if you've been really tired and burnt out, you're struggling with your adrenals, it's a good time to experiment and maybe cut some things out and see if it helps you feel better. So these could be whole foods too, like starting with the big ones, gluten, dairy, shellfish, tree nuts, and soy are really common allergens that a lot of us will react to. So starting there, if you haven't already, those big
Right.
ones, if you're already eating a whole foods diet, but you're not feeling 100%, it's something you can experiment with and see if you notice a shift.
That's a great tip, because I feel like there's a whole range of how good or how bad foods are. We don't want to label it, but for
Yeah.
example, there's kind of obviously the really good range of the vegetables, good legumes and nice healthy proteins and so forth, without eliminating food groups. But then there's the opposite end of the scale of the really hardcore takeaways, deep fried chicken and burgers and chips. But then there's like this middle range. And I feel like sometimes a lot of us, and I know I was kind of in the middle, going through adrenal fatigue, going, I'm not unhealthy down this end. Maybe I could be better down that end. But this middle range of like spaghetti bolognese, like that's not a terrible thing, but it may not be ideal if someone is burnt out because it's still possibly a refined white processed pasta, for example. But that kind of middle range stuff, what are your thoughts on that? Is that stuff that we need to really pull out as well and kind of go, well, that's a problem as well? Or can we still consume that kind of more fun stuff and feel like we're still having that treat kind of thing?
Yeah, and that's such a good question. And there's a couple different schools of thoughts on this. And so if I were going to take the hardcore approach, and of course it depends on the person,
Yes.
I would, we would say like no refined grains. Like if you're really struggling, an autoimmune paleo diet can be
Right.
really supportive. Like there's always routes you can go if you're really struggling. In a perfect world, you would be able to have this balance where you're well nourished and you can eat that pasta, the spaghetti bolognese, and have these treats without them causing tons of distress and without them putting you on your back with digestive distress or crazy symptoms for days and days after. So it depends what you can tolerate, but also just knowing that like you can have it. One of the biggest problems when we have these meals is just we tend to go crazy with them. So what makes us feel so tired is that we've just had such a big serving. So just for reference and perspective, like a serving of a whole grain like pasta or rice or bread is generally half a cup, or like one slice of bread is one serving.
Right.
But when we think about that with like typical serving sizes, if you go to the restaurant or if you're like hungry and serving yourself, we can get used to just being like lots of rice, like lots of pasta, sauce, and like we have a really big serving and we'll feel tired after that. Like the blood sugar response we're going to get from that, undoubtedly we're going to feel tired. So from a hormonal perspective, we can still have it if we tolerate it well. I mean, if you're sensitive to gluten, it's like switching to some gluten-free noodles and then having half a cup of the noodles. Maybe if you want a little bit more, you add in something like the spaghetti squash noodles or zucchini noodles or cauliflower rice. It could be going all in with those like plant-based noodles or plant-based alternatives, but you can also mix it in if you want a little bit of both worlds. You know, if
That's
you
such
love your
a
pasta,
great
you love
idea.
your rice, but just
Yeah.
be mindful of that portion size, like half a cup,
Yeah.
because when you overconsume those refined carbs, it will make you feel really tired after, especially if you're burnt out, I find. But they can still be a really, in my opinion, therapeutic food, because it can be such a great source of energy.
Yes. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that fine line, isn't it, of going, what's going to cause me to feel good after consuming this, you know, or is it going to make you feel awful if you're already a bit depleted, and you've really got to, it's very individual, as you said, with regards to that. Now, just to clarify, the 1 cup or the half cup you mentioned, was that cooked or uncooked?
Yeah. That would be cooked.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Which is probably a bummer, because that means it's less. So I'm
Yeah,
adjusting around my lighting here.
that's okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's cooked, right? So that refers to white rice, pastas, and more of those, that kind of group for the moment.
Yeah.
And
And
1
even
serve of bread.
you could use that for like your legumes too.
Okay. Okay.
You're
Well, that's
having,
a good
yeah.
reference. Okay, great.
Mhm.
So we've kind of covered that. So if someone's at a place where they're feeling tired every day, or even after sleeping a decent amount, you're still really lethargic when you wake up. Now, let's say, all right, let's go to the waking up part. If you're fatigued, perhaps slight burnout or full-blown adrenal fatigue or something like that, what do you avoid? Like when you get up and you feel exhausted, I don't know, that feeling is really quite horrible and numbing. I found I was craving a lot of salty foods actually at that time.
Yeah.
What do you think we should avoid though, to not cause further damage and spike the cortisol as well, which is a problem in all of this?
Yeah. So if you're feeling that way, I think one of the worst things that we can do is just wake up reaching directly for a big cup of coffee,
Right.
and then like pouring like a big bowl of cereal, or going for these really high carb breakfasts, just because it's going to send us up. But the crash that comes down that follows is going to be really hard, especially if you're already struggling hormonally in the morning. So if you're feeling this way, it's really important to just make sure that you're having a really nice, balanced, energizing meal, especially in the mornings if you're feeling tired in the mornings. So if you don't have much of an appetite, one of my tricks is using like protein powder and making like a nice smoothie. Or even in the winter, if it's cold where you are and you're not really resonating to the smoothie thing. I'm over in Canada, so like I feel this hard in the winter, is making like a nice tea. Like you could do a matcha or a nice decaf, like one of the like more herbal, like a rooibos or chai
Right.
tea, and add some like collagen powder, and just give yourself a little sustenance, a little protein to it, and a little something. I'm going to share some recipes with you if you're watching this, so you'll have access to this type of thing. But like adding a little bit of protein to like a drink that you can sip on, that just kind of helps you stabilize the blood sugar. And if you want, you could add a little bit of honey or a little bit of maple syrup, like a little bit of some sort of sugar to get you going, just like not crazy, right? It's not like a big bowl of cereal. It's going to send us up super sky high and have this big crash after. So a little bit of fuel in the morning, and then just focusing on the foods that you're going to get the most out of every bite, right? So like the colorful foods, you want quality protein, and you want your meals balanced, right? Because if you just focus on one of these, then you're probably going to find that you have cravings. You're
Right.
probably going to find that you don't feel totally satiated. And you want something that's going to keep you just really level and feeling good until the next snack or meal.
And on that as well, do you think it's a really individual thing as to people snacking or just having meals? Because there's so much out there as well about intermittent fasting and, you know, waiting a certain amount of hours between meals. Do you believe that's a personal thing, or do you have advice for people who are feeling a bit burnt out as to the best way to go about that? Should we be having something, even that nice little bit of tea with a bit of collagen or protein or something every 2 hours? Or do you advise that we wait longer till we're hungry?
This, I think, is pretty dependent on what's going on with you. And like, I wish I could just, say, oh, this is set in stone and go out and do this.
Yeah.
But really gauge how you feel. I mean, if you feel like you're hungry, if you're feeling shaky, don't deprive yourself because you're trying to push it to lunch. But I mean, if you feel totally fine between breakfast and lunch and you don't feel called to a snack, then I don't feel like you need to force it either. And sometimes people ask me, like, they're interested in doing intermittent fasting, but they're burnt out. So they're wondering how they can apply this to their lives. And the cool thing is, it doesn't have to be what you see out there on the internet that's working for one person. If somebody has a really long, with intermittent fasting, you're giving yourself a feeding window. And so you're fasting a certain number of hours a day, right? So you can adjust it to what works for you and your body. So if you're the type of person who needs a little snack before bed just to stabilize your blood sugar and have a good sleep through the night, then don't worry about cutting off the food right at dinner. And you can, and then just kind of adjust the fasting schedule to your needs, and don't put pressure on yourself for it to be very long, like a really long window of fasting. So maybe on another note, maybe you do cut the like meal time off right after dinner if you're the type of person who struggles with like binge eating in the evening. So you set a fine line in the sand so that like after 7, I'm not eating until breakfast. And so from 7 till 8 a.m., that's your window. So it's really like customize it to you, but don't feel like you have to do these like 14-hour fasts if it's not serving you right now. And one thing I always remind people is like, when you're burnt out, you're depleted, right? Your body's depleted and you need to nourish it back up. So tap into your intuition. You have that like inner wisdom of what your body needs. Don't be afraid to ask it and see what pops up for you. Yeah. And just see like, okay, how am I going to best nourish myself right now? What foods am I craving? Like what foods in my diet aren't serving me now? Like ask these questions. I really encourage you to just kind of explore it. And it's about creating the most nourishing diet for where you're at right now with your energy levels and your capacity too.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. Thanks for reminding us on that. I think we hear of these concepts and things all the time of listen to your body, use your intuition with your health, with your eating. And I believe that strongly too, but people really do need to do that. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you find this interesting, because I was craving the salt really badly, right? So I'd eat like a bag of Doritos sometimes, like corn chips and things. But then I thought, okay, in the morning, I'm hungry, but I know that my blood sugar is spiking because I'm really fatigued. I'm going to try and have dinner at breakfast. So I started cooking pieces of salmon and like some greens and had it at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And it worked because I was hungry and I'm wanting the salt stuff. So I'd make like the dinner, and I thought, okay, this is okay. Like no one tells you to eat dinner at breakfast, but it's working, right? So that was just something I tried. And I don't know, maybe it might help someone else to do something crazy like that as well. What are your thoughts on that?
And that's so cultural, right? Because I just spent the last couple of years living in Korea, and that's like what their breakfast is. Like they don't have the traditional breakfast foods like we have in maybe Australia and Canada and the States, where it's like all this bread and toast and bagels and croissants, and it's like rice and fish and soup, like brothy soup and fermented vegetables. And I really grew to appreciate like more savory meals at breakfast, or more dinner like meals at breakfast, just because once you try it and see how it makes you feel, it really just feels good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all for that. I'd love to know, if anyone watching does try that or change it, and let us know, how you go with that. I think that's a great little thing to change up. So, all right, so give us, say, 5 staple foods that are really great to have as a base and maybe a go-to for just knowing, okay, if I try to integrate these 4 or 5 foods, every day or two, I'm going to have a good chance at, getting rid of the takeaway stuff or replacing with these healthier versions of things. Can you give us a few examples of your best energizing foods?
Yeah, like a couple of my favorite tricks is to just roast, and you can make it be so lazy about it. And this is what I love about this. My big ones are like the root vegetables. Like I love sweet potatoes and I love like squash, and especially this time of year, as I guess it's your summer, moving into your summer over there in Australia, but it's still a great snack regardless. Like roasting sweet potatoes, just wash them and poke some holes in them with a fork, put them in the oven at like 425 for about 30 minutes till they're soft. And it's such a quick, easy snack, and such an energizing snack that you can have in so many different ways. So I would always just have my fridge full of sweet potatoes and hard-boiled eggs, because they're just quick, easy. So I'd have like that kind of like sweet, energizing carb but it's fiber filled. It's not going to be crazy with my blood sugar. And I'm not eating a whole one. Normally it would be like a fourth to a half at each serving, but also it's cooked. So then it's really easy to throw it into an omelet if you want a quick yummy breakfast, or on top of like salad, or into even just putting like almond butter or tahini or nut butter and just kind of having it as a really quick snack if you just
Great
want something
idea.
to stabilize your blood sugar. Love sweet potatoes and just having hard boiled eggs around for those like balancing, quick balancers. And
Yep.
of course you can get more fancy with them, but that's just like my cheat way of having them on
Yes.
hand and like super accessible. And my other trick is when you go buy groceries and you get all those veggies, is just take half an hour, put on a nice podcast or a nice album that you like to listen to, and just do a little bit of the prep work so that when you need a snack, you'll be more apt to just grab those nourishing veggies or those nourishing snacks rather than like going for the bag of chips.
Right.
Because it's really easy when you want something salty to just open up a bag of chips and quickly crush them if they're around. But if you've done the work and you have like carrots and cucumbers and peppers already chopped, not only does that make your meal prep quicker when you want to like whip up a soup or whip up a stir fry or cook yourself a quick meal, but you could also just like open up a thing of hummus and have some peppers, have some cucumber or some sort of dip that makes it, you get your protein and some, or a nut butter. I mean, like whatever it is that you like, it just makes you more apt to grab those foods if they're ready. Yeah,
that's a great tip. So root vegetables, just not fry them up. Frying them. We are baking them and then putting them in containers. A few hard-boiled eggs, get some tahinis and maybe hummus or nut butters, as you said, maybe almond butter, things like that. I love this. Yeah. It's just so simple, because even chopping up some cucumbers and carrots, do you put them in water when you store them, just to say if you want it for like 2 days or something? Because I find the carrots get a bit dry.
Yeah, I usually just put the carrots in water and then I just kind of drain them, just chop them up and drain them. Same with celery. Cucumber, I find it goes a bit soggy. So cucumber, I just kind of, I find it so quick to chop. I kind of just prefer that one fresh, to be honest. But but like I would just cut it into maybe the circles and just if I was going to eat it like in the next day or so. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And how can we then create the perfect meal? So we've got a few bases here. What would a really nice lunch or dinner look like on a plate that would really give us nice energy and a good mix of nutrients as well?
Yeah. So thinking about, and I love this question, but it's just like making every bite count, right? And so how can you maximize the nutrition on your plate? Like in the perfect world, that's what you would be doing. Like we're thinking maximizing nutrition and we're thinking balance, right? So with every meal, we want to think that we're getting energizing carbs in some shape or form. And so ideally, like you're going to get, a cheat way. Sometimes we don't realize like a carbohydrate is really anything that grows from the earth, with a couple exceptions. Like avocados doesn't have like many carbs in it, but most like legumes and grains and vegetables are all sources of carbs.
Right.
First and foremost. I mean, some have protein, some have a little bit of fat, but they're all kind of sources of carbs. So we're focusing on getting that carb energy from veggies for the most part. If you want to add a little bit of whole grains in there, that's totally okay. If you're tolerating it well, if you find that you're not crashing after, I think, and you're digesting it well, just remember a half serving is a good serving size, and try not to go crazy with it. So it's kind of like a condiment, almost thinking of the starchy like grains as a condiment, and veggies are like the main star when it comes to carbs. Because you're going to get the most nutrition out of that. Like when you think of what has more nutrition, rice or pasta, or this like cup of mixed greens, right? More nutrition, like more micronutrients and vitamins in the greens and the veggies. Yeah. So we've got that. And then we want some protein, right? So protein is really important too. And it was going to be one of my other tricks, is just to like batch cook your proteins. If you're barbecuing or roasting or grilling, I find it, if you haven't prepared it, or if it's in the freezer and not available, it's easy to just like reach for something else. And sometimes when we're hungry and we haven't prepared, then those are the times when we're ordering in, or we feel like we don't have anything ready. So those are the times when maybe we'll just not have those proteins because they're not ready. But if they're prepared, then sure, you can add them to a soup. You can add them to a little like lettuce wrap. Like there's so many ways you can use them if you prepare them. So it could be chicken, it could be nice grass-fed beef, it
Yeah.
could be fish. You can really like, the options are endless depending where you are and what's available and what you like. But just opting for the best quality you can, and then just, I find if you just prepare them, then you'll eat them.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a bit of chicken done, I find that as well when I do a little bit on the weekend, when we're organized. Sometimes we are, sometimes we
Yeah.
aren't. Having some
Yeah.
chicken done, and then my little one will go, "Oh, can I have some chicken?" I'm like, "Yes, I have it done. It's, we did it yesterday. It's been in the fridge, and at least I know I can give, my 3-year-old some healthy stuff, chop up some cucumbers or whatever. It's not always perfect, of course. We've got to get takeaway
Yeah.
sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's the majority of it. A little bit of prep goes a long way. You're so right, Danielle. Is
Yeah.
there
And
any
even
final?
like that
Yeah, sorry,
snack
go
that we were
ahead.
talking about,
Yeah,
even that snack that I was mentioning, if you have the veggies ready, but
yeah,
you want a little something more, then you can have like your chicken too. And you can
yeah,
even go buy a rotisserie chicken. Like if that makes it easier for you, and go buy a nice rotisserie
sure.
chicken from your grocery store. Like it's just, and you can make a nice broth with the bones when you're done, like how about that?
Great.
um,
Perfect.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
so it can go a long way. And nowadays it couldn't be easier to just like be prepared. I mean, there's
yeah,
services out there to support us in that. It's just
yeah.
having it on hand, right? If it's on hand,
Absolutely.
then we'll have it.
Yes. Yeah. If it's available, you'll have it. Not in the freezer or the fridge. It has to be kind of cooked or prepped, I think, to
Yeah.
just for busy life to keep up with that. And finally, any
Yeah.
more
Especially if you're
tips?
tired.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
If you're totally fatigued, and that's the thing as well. Get some of those amazing meal deliveries if you need to for a couple of weeks, if you like, right? If you have to, if you're at that
Yeah.
stage, there's nothing wrong with that. There's great healthy things
No.
available
And
around the world.
if it's available to you and going to help you get your nutrition on track, like you'll notice a difference. If you've been eating unbalanced and kind of a lot of processed foods, and that's a way for you to just embrace more colorful foods and better quality foods, I feel like you'll notice a really big difference. And if you don't have to do the prep work, like if that's available to you and it makes it easy, like I fully support it. But it's also, we can prepare things pretty simply too if we need to,
Yeah, I
if
agree.
that option's not available. So
Yeah,
we can do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Any final tip that you've got for us to stay healthy and energized, Danielle?
Um, I feel like this was a great conversation. It's,
I think we've covered a lot.
yeah, I feel like if you find yourself stressing about food and it's becoming more stress than it's worth, just step back and reassess, and actually ask yourself, okay, like, what do I like eating? What do I want to make for this week? And how do I keep it simple? You don't
Yeah,
have to go crazy. It doesn't have to be Instagram or like TikTok
sure.
perfect for whatever you see on social media. Like take away the pressure and find foods that you like, and foods like we chatted about today that are going to just be nourishing for your body. Like what's going to build you back up right now? Like what do you need?
Yeah.
And what don't you need? Like what are you having right now that you don't need? Ask
Mm,
yourself that. You probably know. For me, coffee was a big one. My relationship with coffee had to change on my journey to not being completely burnt out. So it's kind of like accepting the hard truth
yeah.
and embracing something new that feels a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
great tip as well. And it's the relationship with things as well. Like had to go off coffee as well. And I
Yeah.
didn't have it for a long time, but now I have it in a healthier way. And I know that I don't have the crash because I'm healthier. So it's like
Yeah.
knowing your boundaries at different, sometimes you have to pull back from stuff, but then
Yeah.
learning where your limits are with everything. This has been incredible. I think we have to do another interview really soon with you, Danielle,
Yeah,
because
this
you're
was
full of
so
good
fun.
info
Thank
and
you.
topics that we can delve into. Head to the adrenalrecoverycollective.com to get in touch with Danielle as well, and she's on social media. I'll post you guys the link on this interview as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Danielle. It's been amazing and
Oh,
really
my
insightful.
pleasure. Yeah, it's been my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see you again soon, everyone. Bye.
Bye.